Good morning, Nottingham Comic Con. How are we doing today? Yeah, fantastic, good. Okay, so first panel of the day, we'd like to welcome Piers Baker, creator of Ollie and Quinton's syndicated webcomic. Then we have Roger Langridge, writer, artist on The Muppet Show, and writer of Thor the Mighty Avenger through Marvel. And at last we have Robin from, as part of the Etherington brothers, co-creators of Baggage, Monkey Nuts, Von Dugan, and Malcolm Magic. So welcome our guests, please.
Hey.
So, guys, let's talk about all ages work, because that's what I feel people want to hear about from you guys, because that seems to be the field that you're most known for as three creators. So, as creators of all ages comics, how have you seen the scene change over the last few years with the growth of the knowledge of comic books and the development of web comics and web comic strips as well, cartoon strips as well? So, anyone feel that?
Okay. I think, yeah, I shouldn't do that. Yeah, it's changed a lot in the last few years, where Marvel and DC have more or less abandoned children. Other publishers have come to sort of fill that gap. So publishers like Boom Studios, that works. And to a lesser extent, who else? Who else has done? Well, Image have done some. That depends who they rely on what they brought. But yeah, there are a lot of publishers doing all ages comics now. But it's not superheroes. And I think the landscape has changed now that a lot of people who think that comics are superheroes haven't quite got their heads around the fact that all of the good stuff for kids is no longer in the superhero field. It's happening everywhere else. You've got things like the Phoenix here, you've got the stuff that Boom does with Adventure Time and all that sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it's not happening in superheroes. It's not coming up from Marvel and DC. But the web strips, there's web cartoonists, there's alternative cartoonists who have come up doing their own sort of adult stuff and then have sort of got co-opted into the children's comics because their styles are perceived as being kid-friendly. Which is sort of the path I took. It's still changing. It's constantly changing, and changing faster and faster in a way.
Okay. Piers, do you, as a cartoonist and a cartoon strip creator, you were syndicated out in the US. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How long was that for? That you had that for? And the publication, it was USA.
Well, I was syndicated by King Features, which is one of the 4 top syndication companies in the world. So it's quite an honour. They syndicated me for 4 years. Although they loved my work, it didn't really connect with an American audience. My comic is quite British, very very British humour. So which is why I'm here today, sort of come help push that.
Ollie and Quinton is primarily about the character. Is it Ollie's the
Ollie is a seagull.
Seagull,
yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
and Quinton is a worm. They actually started out as characters in a children's sort of magazine, a monthly magazine for the RNLI.
What was that called?
It was called Storm Force. It's their quarterly kids club magazine.
And that saw a lot of all ages content coming forward through other creators as well.
Sorry, so
so it was an anthology of stories, and the Storm Force was part of that.
My comic strip?
Yeah.
My comic strip was just literally a strip at the back of the kids' club magazine about Stormy Stan, the lifeboat man. Okay,
because talking about these collections of all ages stories and coming together, Phoenix seems to be kind of the beacon of British version of that collection of creators and artists. And Robin, you're quite heavily involved with the Phoenix work, aren't you?
Yeah.
Is this one? Yeah. It's on.
The UK, I think, is extremely special in terms of anthology comic making, because although the anthology comic as an entity exists all over the world, and obviously Japanese are particularly prevalent in the Korean market, and they do very large anthology comics every week. But the UK anthology comic has existed for an extremely long time, and obviously with the legacy of stuff like the Beano and the Dandy, there's been obviously a lot of love for these strips over time, but both of those titles have died away, as we've seen over the years. And what we've actually had in the last 7-8 years is a kind of a rebirth of this idea of all ages, family-friendly, comedy, action, adventure, serial storytelling, but doing it in an anthology format. And so I was originally published with my brother in a comic called the DFC, which doesn't exist anymore, but the DFC gave birth to what is now the Phoenix comic, which I think is about to celebrate its 200th issue, which is, quite frankly, a ridiculous achievement for a weekly comic in the modern era.
That's about 4 years, isn't it?
It's
worth of content.
Just shy of 4 years, and I mean that's coming out of the recession that almost kneecapped all the comics on the shelves in the UK. I mean,
Publishing generally.
it just destroyed everything. I mean,
Did all of you feel that the recession that happened, and was all ages comics hit particularly hard? As other comics, superheroes, as you quite rightly pointed out, aren't aimed at all ages. That perhaps those the older audience has that disposable income. They're not reliant on their parents for the money to buy the books that they're interested in. And is that affecting the way that, or did it? Did you see that affect the way that all ages books were being released, or people were commissioning them? And,
nothing affects Roger.
Nothing. Untouchable.
I wish.
Literally untouchable.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the success of Adventure Time for Boom has been ridiculous.
Oh, that's been huge, hasn't it? Adventure Time.
And that's happened right at this, in this last 4-year period that we're talking about. That's when it's all kicked off. I was at the San Diego Comic Convention a few years ago, and they'd just started their Adventure Time comics, and they had this game that you could play at the convention where you had a map and you could get a stamp on it from different booths that had an Adventure Time connection. And they had one guy there for the show to stamp these maps, and it turns out that they just couldn't meet the demand. There was this queue going around for like days. They had to have like 5 people full time just stamping maps for 5 days solid, just because it was this big thing.
But those are the kind of excellent stories that I think you're seeing more and more of, like the enthusiasm from the audience for these kind of titles. I mean, Adventure Time is a great example, but Adventure Time isn't an anomaly. I mean, everybody needs to understand that. You get one of these every 10, 15 years, which just explodes across every possible demographic and also every possible merchandise.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons the comic does well is because the TV show does so well.
Yeah.
It's because it's the tail of the TV show. It's not the head of the dog, if you know what I mean.
But it's nicely not unique, I mean, I think the thing is, if you look across 3 or 4 of the best subscribed animation channels in the world, you're going to find 5 or 6 titles that are just as good as Adventure Time. The writing is that high, the quality of the animation is that high, and then when you look to the comic market, I think we're seeing more and more emerging titles that are trying extremely hard to ape the high standard of the animation. It used to be that the comic was almost like the cheap knockoff, wasn't it? It was like a substandard version of the best animation you've just seen. But now, a lot of the writers from the animated show are now writing in the comic. I think The Simpsons actually started that. I think Bongo Comics took a lot of the original creators, didn't they? And they said, these guys it's not that they have time on their hands, although as writers we do have time on our hands. I pump mine into the PS4.
Right.
But they had the time and the opportunity to go away and spearhead a very high watermark for comics. And I think no Bongo and probably no Boom to a certain degree, because that's the grade, the standard that they're trying to match. And the Phoenix is just a recent extension of exactly the same kind of attitude.
Well, the Simpsons comics, the Bongo stuff, was creator-led. It was Matt Groening's own company. He set it up. It wasn't like he was licensing it out and expecting them to do a good job of it. He was overseeing everything.
Oh, so it's Matt Groening's company, then, Bongo?
Totally,
Interesting, how to cover all bases.
And I mean, that was at one point, the Simpsons comic was the highest selling comic in the UK by a proportional number. I think Doctor Who knocked it off the top spot at one point, but it was destroying everybody, and it was because they had multiple titles, but they were all excellent. And it's the quality which continues to be the anathema to success. Is if you allow the comic you put on the shelf, be it for kids or adults, to start dropping in the standard of the writing or the art, you just see your sales figures going in the same direction.
And kids recognise good quality in comics, though, and cartoon strips of any sort, whether it's a short form story in an anthology, or whether it's an entire book, or whether it's a 3-panel thing on a 3-panel story on a website. They recognise good quality.
And there is the aspect of it that you are selling to the parents as well, because they're the ones who are ultimately paying for it. So
Correct.
Unless it works on a level for the parents as well as for the kids, you're not going to sell it to anybody. And the quality has to be visible to the parents as well.
These guys are so knowledgeable. I'm one of these cartoonists, maybe some of you are the same, who I'm sat in a cave drawing my comic just to make myself laugh. I'm in awe of your...
That's what we're all doing, right? That's what we're all doing.
You know so much.
Piers, we were talking before about it, and only a moment ago at your table, which is upstairs. What table number are you?
U57.
U57.
Just like the submarine.
Oh, yeah, that's the one. I thought it was 57. Anyway, well, we were talking before, and you said, but I don't know how I'm gonna fit in because my knowledge isn't as broad. But then you instantly mentioned 3 or 4 cartoonist names. Never even heard of. Well, it's just all about field and
I think you're right. I mean, I was syndicated in the States, so I know a little bit more about the American market. I mean, you were talking about recession just then. One of the things we noticed in the newspapers was they were cutting back and they were cramming comics onto a page, and they were making them so small.
Isn't this Bill Watterson's perpetual argument when he was creative?
Exactly.
They're having panels hacked out and
Yeah.
reformatted.
The Sunday panel, you lose the introductory panel. And my character, I mean, if you've seen my comic strips, Ollie and Quentin, one of my characters is a tiny little worm. Of course, when the comic is reduced to sort of...
He becomes a speck.
Yes, it's a speck, and people are looking at going, well, something's talking, but we can't see what it is.
So, moving sort of slightly on, now you talked about these animated shows and their connection with then having comic books released. Is there any of your own creative, your own series that you could ever see turning into an animated feature, or that you think?
Oh, we've had those conversations.
Have you? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the funny thing about this industry is, if you hang around for long enough, eventually somebody comes up to you and tries to buy your work to turn into something.
Still waiting.
Something.
I have actually had my cartoon animated in the States.
Did you? Yours was
they only did a sample, sort of 2-3 minute animation, and it was so awful.
It was that bad, was it?
It was that bad. The drawings were diabolical. And
so they didn't have you doing the drawings?
No, I just did the storyboard. So I sort of I sewed together a few comics and we put it into one long story. But they got the voices so wrong, and I'm very particular about how my characters will sound, and they didn't sound like them. So
well, that's good, because that's an absolute inverse to what we were saying about high quality of animation trying to feed into better quality comics, but it can cut both ways.
Complete the sort of crazy mirror reflection, isn't it? You sort of hope it's going to work out well, but in the end it somehow doesn't.
The thing is, it's the animation market moves just like the children's market, and right now they're actually trying to create new boundaries in animation to catch very, very specific age bands. So they're looking at like 6 to 9 being a market that you sell to, and then 7 to 10, and they're chopping them into ever smaller brackets, which is kind of nonsensical, because when I was 6, I was probably watching something that was aimed at an 11 or a 12-year-old, and that's just what people do. But they have brackets and windows, and they try to fill them, and they will take your work, classic example there, and they will give it the wrong voice, and they'll put it in the wrong format, or they'll have missed the point of the humour at the heart of it. But that's because they're coming at it from a different point of view, and I think it's, you choose, you go one way or the other. You become precious about it, and you decide that that's not the strip you let anyone convert, or you say, actually, you know what, take this one, have fun with it, because it does possibly get your name out there and open up a new market, and it's hard. You've got to fall somewhere at some point.
I think something I discovered was I do a 3-4 panel comic. That doesn't translate terribly well into a long animation.
Yes, because 3 or 4 panels in an animation lasts a nanosecond.
Yeah, exactly. 2 or 3 seconds, and then there's
a
long pause.
Simon's cat found a way sort of to do something that fell somewhere between the sort of 2-minute animation and the comic strip. But yeah, I know what you mean. Totally, I understand that.
Absolutely. Now, so Piers, you do a web cartoon strip, as we've already mentioned. But Roger, you also do one as well, the Iron Duchess. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I did a web comic. I started in 1999 called Fred the Clown, and I did that for 5 years.
Which you should go read. You've got copies of it at your table.
That is amazing.
Yes.
Fred is fantastic.
Thank you. But when I stopped doing Fred the Clown and I started to get more sort of work in commercial comics, I decided that one day I would do a graphic novel with Fred the Clown based on a Buster Keaton film, or inspired by Buster Keaton films, because Buster Keaton is a huge hero of mine. I just had an opportunity this year to actually do that.
So it was completely silent. It was an entirely silent comic.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, because I read all the pages that you have so far of the Iron Duchess, and it's all done as a silent movie, but with the occasional thought bubble or a little speech bubble, but with pictograms inside it. Which I think it
I'm
just
trying to
has
take
such
advantage
charm.
of the fact that it's a comic as well.
Yeah.
There's things you can do in comics that you can't do in movies, and there's things you can do in movies that you can't do in comics. So why not take advantage of the medium? So I'm trying to sort of. It's an experiment to make a silent movie in comic book form, I suppose.
Have you found a good pianist to play while people are reading the book as well? Because that was a thing, wasn't it, in silent films? They had somebody playing the piano on the side of the stage. The side of it at the same time. I felt like that should have been happening. Like, ding, 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 ding.
I could maybe, do a playlist or something.
Oh, that'd be great! An Iron Duchess playlist. That'd be fantastic. But so I don't know whether the audience have any questions or not. Whether Tony's concentrating, he's out there. But in the meantime, while he's talking, let's talk because. Your book, The Musical Monsters of Turkey Hollow, when was that printed? That came out?
That came out last November. It was supposed to come out for Thanksgiving, because it's a Thanksgiving-themed book. So that was when it came out.
And you picked up a Harvey Award for that?
Yes. Got a Harvey Award a couple of weeks ago at the Baltimore Comic Con. Which surprised the hell out of me. But,
you didn't know you were receiving the accolade?
Well, I knew I was nominated, but there were so many good books out last year. I didn't expect to be the one that was, best original graphic novel. That's ridiculous.
How important do you feel that the awards are? Those sort of awards, Golden Eagle or Harveys, or even Eisners. How important are they to creators of all genres of cartoons, comic strips, comic books, anything like that?
I don't think it actually makes a lot of difference financially, or I suppose it could in terms of your reputation. I think the big thing for me was that it sort of validated what I do for a living to my dad.
And that's what we're looking for.
He never really understood why I would go into a field that didn't have financial success as a possible outcome. But when there's an award sitting on my mantelpiece, I think he sort of got it a little bit finally.
Fantastic. Do you want to see if the audience have any questions? Yeah. Audience, so we'd like any audience members who feel like they've got questions for our panellists, put your hand up and our lovely assistant will come out and see you.
Otherwise, we'll just keep talking.
Yeah, have you got that, Sugar?
I have, babes, yeah.
All right, darling.
Yeah. Any questions? Anyone got a question? Oh, okay, here you go. Yeah.
You've just said that your dad didn't understand you going into art. How did you get into it, and what made you decide, I'm going to do this for a living?
I started reading, I say reading, I started looking at comics before I could read. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, at school, our teacher gave us, as an art project, a strip of paper, and we were supposed to do a comic strip, like in the newspapers, a 3 or 4 panel strip. And I got this piece of paper, and I covered both sides with 16 panels, and it just kept on going. I suddenly found my thing. It was like a switch went off in my head, and I decided then and there that I would be a cartoonist when I grew up. So whenever my father would ask me what I wanted to do for a living, and I told him I wanted to be a cartoonist, and by the time he'd stop laughing, I'd say, no, actually I want to be a teacher or something. I just lie. I lied constantly for years, so that they'd get off my back, and I never really had a plan B. I just wanted to be a cartoonist, and I refused to go away until they let me.
So you've been making people laugh since then, which is good. I think that's fantastic. Whatever way it comes, really, isn't it?
Parents shouldn't understand.
No,
they shouldn't
don't.
understand why you go into this. It's a very important.
No.
that they don't understand for as long as possible.
Yeah, they never understand what profession you go into.
But you're right. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's important to know that, and that's not why you do it. It should.
I remember opening the newspaper when I was young and seeing a cartoon strip. I think it was Peanuts actually, and I said to my dad, "Does this bloke earn a living at drawing a comic strip?" And he said, "Oh yeah, very good living." I went, "Right."
That's for me then.
Fame and fortune is for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's downhill ever since.
I think that was exactly the same.
Off to where we go.
That was the same for my brother as well. I think he realised somebody actually drew the Bash Street Kids and that they weren't photographs taken of real children in a school. And that was his light bulb moment for definite. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions outside?
Any more?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Young lad here at the front.
What's the worst experience of you drawing comics?
They're lined up round the block. No.
Is this in the top 10? Is this
Number three.
This question? No.
This question.
Worst experience of comics. I think it was realizing that as an industry and as a job, it is quite fragile, and a lot of factors can affect your ability to find your audience, connect with your readership, sell books. I mean, the UK is a very strange place to talk about comics, because if you go to France, you're a professional comic artist or writer, you are just a writer or an artist. You're accepted like anybody else, and you'll do pretty well. And it's the same in America to a certain degree. But in the UK, we love comics, but we don't seem to like getting them into the hands of people who actually want to read them. It's quite difficult to find the stuff that's actually being made. So I think probably the worst experience is just the kind of ongoing conversation you have to have with booksellers and comic book stores and people who actually want to give you the best that there is out there, and realizing that it's a little bit too hard. It's a little bit harder than it should be for me to make a thing and you to get a thing. And I think that's probably the only real downside I found. The rest of it's a right old laugh.
I suppose for me, the worst thing was, it's happened a couple of times. I've been working on something and it's been cancelled. And, when you're working on properties that are owned by other people, that can happen.
Oh yeah, I want to have that one as well.
So, if there's a lesson to be learned from that, it's to work on your own stuff as often as you can. The financial rewards up front are usually lower, but the satisfaction and the control is much, much greater. I don't know if I'd only do my own stuff if I had my time over again, but I'd probably get pretty close to it, yeah.
I think for me, it's almost weekly, it's seeing fantastic artwork by someone else, like these guys here. You look at it and you go, oh, they're so good, I'm really rubbish. And, I find it very demoralizing for about 30 minutes. And then I go, right, okay, I've got to be better. And so I just work harder and harder and harder so that I'm nearly as good as them.
I think it was also, actually, I got another one as well. Finding Akira too late in life. I stumbled upon Akira, the graphic novel. Having seen the film, I didn't even realize or connect with the fact that it had once been a graphic novel. And then I realized that there were 6 telephone book-sized collections out there that had to be purchased, and they all cost a lot of money, and it added up to an immense amount of money. But I felt like I had lost out on something for about 10 years, having not read that when I was young, because it was mind-blowingly good. I probably would be making very different comics if I read that when I was young.
So you're saying that it's an incredibly influential book to read if you're looking to create comics yourself?
Well, no, it's just that I think it's probably the highest watermark of the Asian markets, graphic novel produce. The detail, the story writing, the characterization, the consistency from page 1 to page 3,000. I mean, who does that? It's insane. I mean, it's on a different level, and occasionally you'd see that. Maybe something like Asterix or Tintin in Europe has something similar where you could see, I can't believe there was one person maybe at the center of this who could produce so much that was so consistent for so long and such a high quality. But everybody only really has one. There's only one, and it takes another 50 years before you find the next person who comes along who can do that same sort of thing. And I was just late to the party, that's all.
So if we got time for one more question, if
Yeah, one
anyone's
more.
got one more, anyone? Okay.
Doesn't have to be about comics. We can do financial advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Romantic advice.
I've got some good mortgage tips for you.
Favourite Bond girl?
Ava Green.
Ava Green?
Ava Green.
Roger?
Diana Rigg.
Oh,
I had a
classic.
feeling you were going to say that.
Classic. Piers, you got a favourite Bond girl?
I can't think of her name. The one who comes out of the water in Doctor No.
Ursula.
Ursula Andress.
Ursula. Brilliant, fantastic.
What a great ending
I'll have
for
that
the
one
All
as well.
Ages panel.
Yeah. Finish on a high note. So we'd like to thank our guests, Piers Baker, Roger Langridge, and Robin Etherington.
Traveling to the past without a safety net. Traveling to the past without a safety net. Traveling to the past without a safety net. Traveling to the past without a safety net.